to, and they will be anonymous, so no one else will see the questions that you are typing. And we'll take as many of those as we have time for at the end. So let's jump right into this, and let's talk about dealing with challenging behaviors in the classroom. So I'd like to start with this slide, which is entitled, "Why Aren't You Superman?" and ask you whether you've heard of that documentary called Waiting for Superman about what is wrong with schools. One message from this film that some people took away is that families are waiting for Superman to come along and save their child. Now, the question I ask you is, should that Superman be the child's teacher? Should it be the parents? Who should be Superman? And the point I want to get across in this slide is that nobody should be expected to be Superman. No one person can do everything, and it really isn't fair for any of you to have an expectation on you that you should be Superman when you can't. So instead of being Superman, you need tools to be able to teach children and deal with their challenging behaviors. In another movie, which is called The Incredibles, which you may or may not have seen, there's a character named Edna who says in the movie, "No capes." And she actually says this because capes get caught in things. So I'd like to start off the presentation by saying, no capes. You don't have to be Superman because there are tools and people who can help you. So today's toolkit will focus on identifying the causes of challenging behavior. We will discuss basic strategies for dealing with these behaviors. We will also identify built-in resources within your school system to help with challenging behaviors. And then finally, the ultimate goal here is give you something better than a cape. So as Edna says, no capes. So let's start off by answering a question, which is, why does the child or student do these things? Why is the child behaving this way? Science has basically shown us that behavior is only maintained, meaning that it's going to continue to occur, only when it's rewarding in some way. In addition to that, behavior is a means of communication. So challenging behavior is really your student's way of telling you what he wants, and he may not have the skills to tell you the appropriate way. So ask yourself when you see students acting out, what is this student trying to say to me right now? And also ask yourself, what is the payoff, as Dr. Phil would say? If you've ever seen Dr. Phil, that's one of his famous lines. He's always asking, what's the payoff for the behavior? Essentially, when it comes to identifying the payoff, everything that all of us do boils down to two possible reasons for doing it. One is either to get good stuff, which is either called rewards, or the more technical term is reinforcement, to get a reinforcer, or it's being done to avoid bad stuff, so avoiding some sort of punishment or aversive situation that they may encounter. So think about that in your own life. You go to work every day to get good stuff, you get paid money. While you're at work, you might meet certain deadlines to avoid being punished for not meeting those deadlines, or to avoid not getting a raise or something like that. All of us are doing this every day with all of our behaviors that we engage in. Now when it comes to kids, there's lots of good things that they may want. For one, kids are oftentimes looking to get attention, and interestingly that could be good or bad attention. So even reprimanding or having long discussions about what the child's doing wrong and things like that. Sometimes that is even something good to them. Tangibles could include the child getting their favorite foods, fun activities, or toys that they really like. Or sometimes kids, and this is especially the case with children with autism, might engage in behaviors because they receive sensory stimulation from it. So these are behaviors that sometimes are referred to as self-stimulatory behaviors. Let's watch this video. I really enjoy this video. Showing a child who's engaging in a behavior of throwing himself on the ground to look and try to get attention.
Number 7, the crying game.
I've already alluded to this in the past, but it's important to note that attention does not have to be positive to be rewarding. So in the video we just watched, which I always chuckle when I watch that video because this child is following his mother around the house, trying to get her attention, throwing a tantrum, throwing himself on the ground, just looking for her to try to give some attention. Now, oftentimes that attention could be, you know, something in the form of a parent consoling their child, you know, telling them it's okay, don't cry, and things like that. But oftentimes it can also be something that's not positive, like a parent reprimanding or a teacher reprimanding or having long discussions about the behavior, or perhaps even giving dirty looks or certain facial expressions that provide some sort of attention to the child. Even those little subtle things can maintain the behavior. So now let's move on to talk about some things kids want to avoid. Sometimes it might just be having to do any sort of work at all. Some kids want to avoid the classroom completely. It could be that they don't want to listen to people telling them what to do. It could be they don't want to give up something they want to keep doing. But even at home, it's things like taking a bath or getting ready in the morning. And this is just a couple of things on a long list they might like to avoid in their day-to-day life. And most of the time, it's interesting that we have to give up something we really want and do something we really don't want. And this happens all the time for all of us, really. So let's take a look now at some very specific examples of, I was talking before about behaviors happening because there's a payoff either of getting good stuff or avoiding bad stuff. So let's look at this example of getting good stuff. In this example, a student, Jenny, is playing with her favorite toy, and her teacher says, okay, it's time to put away the toy. And the child, then, Jenny, starts protesting and crying, and that's followed up with Jenny getting to play with the toy a little bit longer. So in this case, you can see how if Jenny's allowed to play with the toy a little longer, her protesting and crying is going to probably increase because she's going to learn that that isn't a behavior that's very effective for her. It gets her more time to play with her toys. Now here's an example of a child engaging in a behavior to avoid bad stuff. So in this case, Jacob hates math, and his teacher says it's time to do math. And Jacob then cries and throws himself on the floor, and then after that he gets to avoid doing math for 5 minutes. So just like in the case of Jenny, his behavior in this case, which is crying and throwing himself on the floor, is likely going to be increased because he's getting to avoid something bad that he doesn't want to encounter, which is doing math, and he gets to wait a little longer. So again, Jacob is inadvertently being taught throwing yourself on the floor is a very good idea because it gets you things that you would like. So my question that I ask to you guys is, how would you feel if we were in a world where we could pick the behaviors we want a student to do and make those rewarding, and then make behaviors that are challenging less rewarding so that they lessen or disappear? And the good news is this world does exist, and it is possible, and it is where I now introduce to you ABA, which stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. Essentially, ABA is the use of scientific principles of learning and motivation to teach effectively, and the main concept is that the consequences of what we do affect what we learn and what we will do in the future. Specifically, the main principle is the use of positive reinforcement. And it's the idea that behaviors that produce a good outcome are more likely to occur in the future. So if you present something that the child likes after they engage in an appropriate behavior, they're going to be more likely to do it in the future. Likewise, if you present something the child likes after they engage in a challenging behavior, the same principle applies. They're going to be more likely to engage in that challenging behavior in the future. And people are essentially motivated by what they get out of what they do. And so that's the concept here. And for us, it could be things like money, feeling good for helping someone, getting approval from others. And for kids, it's all the things that we've kind of been discussing so far. So when we talk about applied behavior analysis, we now have the opportunity to learn how we can change this, the behavior, and we do that by looking at the ABCs of behavior. And the ABCs stand for, the A stands for antecedent, and these are the things that occur before the challenging behavior. Then the B stands for behavior, which is the challenging behavior itself, and then the C stands for consequence. And the idea is that consequences are what occur after the behavior. And the reason that we actually care about antecedents and consequences is because they help us figure out why the behavior is occurring. And specifically, there's particular antecedents, and these are, again, the things happening before the behavior that may be setting off the behavior. So if we can figure out what those are and actually change them, then we can affect whether the behavior even occurs to begin with. We also would want to look at particular consequences that might be reinforcing and ultimately maintaining the behavior. So we're not trying to reward the behavior and to make it continue to occur or to increase over time, because oftentimes we're presenting these reinforcers without realizing it. We're not realizing what is actually the reinforcer for the behavior. We have to figure it out. And if we can do that, we can make a big difference in the child's behavior. So what this means for us is we can only change a child's behavior after we've changed our own. And we have that ability to change the antecedents and the consequences and to teach new replacement behaviors that serve the same function or purpose of the challenging behavior. And here's how we can go about doing that. So to change behavior, we need to change the ABCs. And we can actually change the antecedent, the consequence, or both. And in addition to that, we can teach a replacement behavior that the child would engage in instead of the challenging behavior. So let's take a look at an example. I have my ABC up here, my A for antecedent. The antecedent here is that John hates school. His behavior is that he screams when he's at school, and the consequence is that he is sent home. And if you look at the bottom of my screen, the word behavior is there, and I'm going to show you now that the arrow going up means that John's screaming behavior should probably increase because he's being sent home, and given the fact that he hates school, that's the perfect consequence for him. I don't like school, so I'll scream and they'll send me home and I don't have to go there. And in the future, I'm going to scream again because it worked. But look at how powerful it is that if you change the antecedents and the consequences and teach a replacement behavior, you can make a big difference. So let's first look at what would happen if we change the consequence. Now, John is not sent home. Screaming does not equal getting sent home. And the antecedent is changed too. We teach John a replacement behavior for screaming. So instead of saying screaming because he wants to go home, we teach him a new behavior, which is like asking for a break or for help or something like that. And now notice, John is no longer going to be screaming, and his behavior of screaming is decreased. Now, it's essential to know the why in terms of why the behavior is occurring in order to efficiently and effectively change it. So we can't go about figuring out what the antecedent and consequence changes should be until we know why the behavior is occurring, because it's all based on that. The four most common reasons for challenging behavior in terms of why kids do these things is to either get attention, which again could be a good or bad form of attention. It could be to get access to items or activities that they want. It could be to escape from a situation that they don't want to be in. So for example, they don't want to do a certain task, or they don't want to do a certain activity. And then last, they might be doing it because the behavior itself is considered self-reinforcing. So that means the behavior itself produces some sort of sensory stimulation that they enjoy. So these are the kind of like stereotypical or self-stimulatory behaviors you often see that kids will engage in, like hand flapping or body rocking and those sort of things. Now I put this slide up here, which is showing a car that's broken down and damaged, because I want to ask you, if you had a car like this, would you try to fix it on your own, or would you call in an expert and get a mechanic to help you? And I point that out because that's the same situation that you're in here when it comes to a child with these kind of behaviors. There are experts out there who are going to help and be able to give you information on what the function is. We have to figure out which function it is and not just guess. So in this case, you see here Joey is biting Mikey, and you ask yourself, what is the function of this behavior? And it's really not okay to guess, because if you make the wrong guess and you implement the wrong intervention, then you could actually accidentally make it worse instead of making it better. So what we always suggest is that you get a functional behavioral assessment done, and it should be done by a board-certified behavior analyst, or what's known as a BCBA. And this is especially essential when the behavior is either self-injurious or is an aggressive behavior that could hurt another person. Now you might ask yourself, do I really need a BCBA? And I feel pretty strongly that it's necessary, because I think all of this is a lot more complicated than it seems. I've tried really hard today in my presentation to use no technical jargon whatsoever and to speak plain English, but there is a lot involved, and including the fact that sometimes a challenging behavior is happening for more than one reason, and we have to figure out what all of the reasons are. And there are assessment techniques and procedures that need to be done to find that out, and people need to be trained and know how to child or hurt another person. And we also know that once we begin intervention, even if we've designed an intervention based on a functional behavioral assessment, sometimes the behavior gets worse before it gets better. It's that concept that if you're used to being reinforced for a particular behavior and all of a sudden you're not anymore, and I've seen this in kids, they up the ante. So a kid who would normally kind of like throw a little fit is now screaming their head off as loud as they possibly can, to a degree you've never seen before, because they're going, wait a second, you've always given me my reinforcer when I do this, and now you're not? What do I need to do to get you to do it? Let me up the ante for you. So that always kind of is something difficult to deal with, and a trained person knows what to look for, and they collect data on what they're doing to make sure that it's working, and they make really data-based decisions about what to do next. Now, the purpose of the functional assessment is to figure out the source of the reinforcement for the challenging behavior. So what is the payoff? Find out what it is. If you know that, then you can essentially now do things to eliminate the behavior. And this is because all proven treatments are basically boiling down to not giving the reinforcer anymore for the challenging behavior. So for example, if a child like the one in the movie we just saw is falling on the ground to get attention, then we don't give attention anymore when he engages in that behavior. And in addition to that, we need to give him attention. So you give him the same reinforcer, which in this case is attention, for more appropriate behavior. So we teach him an alternative replacement behavior that he can do instead of throwing himself on the ground when he wants to get attention from me. I'm going to show you a couple of charts here of kind of give you an idea of how when you give good stuff to a child or you remove good stuff, and then same thing for bad stuff, giving and removing bad stuff, it can, if you don't do it right, it can actually make behavior change for the worse. So let's look at some examples of that. So let's say you give a child who's engaging in challenging behavior toys, snacks, or activities, something they like. Essentially, this means that that challenging behavior is going to increase. Now, in addition to this, let's say the child is engaging in a positive behavior sometimes, and you actually aren't noticing it at all, so you're not reinforcing it, Or maybe even you're taking away something good that the child likes when they engage in that positive behavior without realizing it. So you're not reinforcing the positive behavior and maybe even removing something they like when they engage in the behavior. So this kind of stuff happens to people all the time. Like I've heard people say stuff at work like, oh yeah, they asked me to make this chart and I made it and I guess I did a good job, so now they've given me all of the task of making charts for every department. Gee, I feel like my good behavior was just punished. So it's that kind of concept. What does that do? That decreases the positive behavior because you're essentially not providing any praise or reinforcement for it and maybe even punishing it. Now, another option of what could happen is you might present something that's disliked by the child. So you give them bad stuff. This is something that's disliked. And if you do this when the child's engaging in a positive behavior, then that positive behavior is going to decrease. And then in our last box here, if you let the child escape or get out of something they don't like to do when they engage in challenging behavior, then the challenging behavior is going to increase. So let's say you tell them to do something and they engage in challenging behavior and now they don't have to do it anymore. You're increasing the challenging behavior. So you can see how there's so many ways that either giving or removing good or bad stuff ends up either increasing challenging behavior or decreasing positive behavior, and that is not what you want to do, obviously. So let's look at the same chart and now look at it of how we can change behavior for the better. So for example, if you give a child their favorite items when they're engaged in a positive behavior, the positive behavior is going to increase. And if you don't reinforce challenging behavior anymore, the challenging behavior is going to decrease. Or even if you remove something they really like whenever they engage in the challenging behavior, it's going to decrease. Now, if you provide consequences or present disliked things when the child engages in the challenging behavior, it will also decrease. So that's giving bad stuff for challenging behavior versus removing bad stuff for challenging or for positive behavior. So if you allow the child to get out of something that they don't like when they engage in positive behavior, then the positive behavior will increase. So like a positive behavior could be something like asking politely, can I have 5 more minutes or something when they don't want to do a particular thing. And if you say sure and you let them escape for 5 more minutes, you've just increased the positive behavior. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk to you about tools that you can use once you've had your functional behavioral assessment done and you know the reason why the child's engaging in the behavior. So if a child's engaging in challenging behavior for attention, here's a lot of things you can do. And you'll notice across the top I have my antecedent, so this is my ABCs, and then I have my replacement behavior. So instead of the challenging behavior, we're going to talk about it now in terms of a replacement behavior, and then I have my C for consequence. And in this chart, I have a lot of ideas here for you. This by no means means that you have to actually implement all of these. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I wouldn't recommend it because if you have a team of people working with a child, everyone should try to be consistent and they should all try to implement the same intervention so that it's effective. And if you're going to get people consistent, you don't want to have too many things for them to remember to do. So you need to think about the child's situation, what's going to work the best for the environment the child's in, and what's going to work the best for the people involved that are implementing it, and pick something. But I really highly suggest that you try to pick at least one antecedent option, one replacement behavior option, and one consequence option. You don't have a complete plan if you don't have a replacement behavior. That's the one thing sometimes people forget a lot, is to do the replacement behavior. So here's just a bunch of ideas basically in this chart. If we wanted to change any of the antecedents for a behavior that is happening to gain attention, one option would be to change signals that there's no attention available. Because what happens is if you say something like, I can't talk to you right now, I'm sorry, you've just signaled I'm not going to be giving you any attention. This could actually let the child know, and then they're going to immediately start engaging in the challenging behavior. So instead of saying something like that, you could just start doing other things, but you could do them maybe nearby the child or something like that. So you'll need to think about what possibly is happening in the environment that might be signaling to this child that they're not going to be getting any attention from me right now. And what can I do to make them see or to not realize that that's actually the case. Now another option would be to provide attention on a regular schedule. So if this is a child who is really wanting attention, why not give them free attention on a regular schedule, like every few minutes or something like that, or whatever makes sense. So for example, if a child is engaging in a challenging behavior every 20 minutes, then maybe you need to give them free attention every 15 minutes. And that would help to be proactive and hopefully keep the behavior from occurring from the get-go. Now, also on an antecedent end, if the behavior is really dangerous and it's not safe to ignore it, you will need to block it. And unfortunately, that is a downfall when a behavior is maintained by attention because the child wants to get attention. So even blocking can be kind of a form of attention. But if it's too dangerous, you will need to block it anyway. So what you'll want to do is minimize the rest of the attention that you're delivering. So don't give them any eye contact. Don't say anything about the behavior. Just simply engage in whatever you need to block it. But please note, I am not saying to restrain the child by no means. I'm just saying do the least intrusive thing to block yourself or others from getting hurt, like putting an object between you and the child or something if they're going to hit you or whatever. So consider that as well. Also now looking at the replacement behavior, you could teach the child to ask for attention and then provide that child attention when they ask. And if a child doesn't speak or doesn't have any vocal communication, they can ask using other things like sign language, picture icons, raising their hand, whatever it is you come up with would be fine. You could also, as a replacement behavior, give them something like an item or activity to keep them busy so that if there's a point where there's not going to be a lot of attention being given to the child, you give them and offer them something else. Like I think parents would be smart to do this when they get on the phone. We were talking earlier about signals that there's no attention available. I swear to you, as soon as a parent gets on the phone, their child is signaled, oh, no attention, let me go ahead and act out now, and they decide they're going to act out right at that moment. Well, changing the signals would be great. Maybe you could wear a Bluetooth or do something a little bit less obvious. But also, what about just giving the child something else to do when you're about to go into a phone call? Also, consider making the replacement behavior easier to engage in than the challenging behavior. So, for example, if a child hits you to get attention, you could put space or objects between yourself and the child, and then you could teach the child maybe to raise their hand or hold up a picture icon to get attention. And obviously raising your hand or holding up a picture is much easier than trying to get up out of your chair and go and reach the person that you need to hit who's across the room. So that's one other thing to consider. And then on the consequence side, one option is to give attention or maybe some other reinforcer, like access to an item or an activity, if the child doesn't engage in the challenging behavior for a specific period of time. So again, let's say the child usually engages in the behavior about once every 20 minutes, then maybe if they can go 15 minutes without the behavior, you give them access to something that they would like, or you give them attention, since attention is really what they seem to want more than anything. Another consequence, which is highly, highly recommended if it's possible, is to no longer provide attention for challenging behavior. I mean, obviously, if a child's engaging in a behavior because they're getting attention from it and they like the attention, if you just stop giving the attention every time they engage in that behavior, then it's going to go away, especially when you teach them a replacement behavior that gets them attention. However, obviously, this doesn't always work, especially in a classroom setting, if it's students who are maybe the ones who are providing attention, and you don't have any control over whether or not they attend. So if it's not possible to no longer provide the attention when they engage in the challenging behavior, then make the reinforcer for the replacement behavior greater than that for the challenging behavior. So for example, the reinforcement they're going to get for challenging behavior will probably be attention still, right? Because you can't prevent it. If they engage in the replacement behavior, give them attention plus something else, and maybe it's something big, something with a good quantity or a good quality to the child. Okay, let's talk now about tools for a tangible function. So this would be the child who's engaging in a challenge behavior to get access to something. You've seen this before. Kids will hit other kids to get their toys, or they might bully another child to do what they want to do on the playground or whatever it is. So in this situation, again, you could change the settings of the triggers that signal the item is not available. So rather than saying something to the child like, you can't have that right now, sorry, it's not available, you could just say, hey, it's time to play with this other thing right now. Another option for antecedent is provide access to the item or activity that they're trying to get access to on a regular schedule. So if once every 55 minutes, or something that will be right before when you're anticipating that they're going to engage in the behavior. Again, like before, you would need to block the behavior if it's too dangerous to ignore with trying not to give too much attention to it otherwise. You can also teach replacement behaviors. One of those would be to ask for the item or the activity that they typically act out to get, and then provide it when the child asks. You could also perhaps give the child a competing item or activity to keep them busy, so something similar or something else that they enjoy, so that they don't care right now about getting access to this other thing that they usually act out to get. And like before, make replacement behavior easier than challenging behavior. Now, on the consequence side, you could give the item or activity that they normally act out to get, or you could give some other reinforcer if they don't engage in the challenge behavior for a specific period of time. So it's just like I talked about with the last slide. If the child doesn't engage in challenge behavior for a certain length of time, they can either have access to the tangible item that they're usually acting out to get, or if you can't give them that for some reason, figure out what other reinforcers they might like to have access to. And then, of course, as before, this is something you should really try to do, which is don't provide the item or the activity that they're trying to access whenever they engage in challenging behavior anymore. So just like before, if a child is engaging in a challenging behavior to get something, you don't give it to them anymore, they're going to eventually learn not to engage in that behavior anymore, and especially once you teach them a replacement behavior. Now, the thing to note here is that as soon as you stop giving them the thing that they want when they engage in challenging behavior, it's going to probably temporarily increase the challenging behavior, and it's for the reasons I said before. You're used to getting something when you engage in that challenging behavior. Now you don't get it anymore, and you're wondering why, and so you're upping the ante. So just be prepared that that little increase is probably going to happen, but it doesn't last, hopefully, for too long if you start teaching a replacement behavior that's going to get them immediate access to the thing it is that they want. Now, if you have a child that's engaging in the challenging behavior to escape something that they don't want to do or a situation they don't like, there's a lot of antecedent options. First of all, you could lower your demands. So even if you have to go so far as to only require them to do one thing, and I know this doesn't sound good because you want to get the child one demand. So it would be something like if you're presenting a math worksheet, you might say you only have to do one problem and then you get to take a break. And then the idea here is that that's not going to go on forever. And I promise you that once the child starts being compliant and you begin to reinforce compliance, the child is going to be able to have those demands increased and eventually will be able to do the whole assignment. But you start small and you build up based on the child showing progress. Another option would be to modify the task, and this is basically just altering the task in a way that makes it less motivating for the child to try to escape. It's different from lowering demands in that the amount of the task is not changed. So, for example, modifying a task could be something like giving the child their favorite pencil to work with during a writing task, or letting a student write an essay about their favorite comic book instead of about their standard essay topic or something like that. Another option would be to give access to preferred items during the task. So this could be like letting them listen to their headphones while they do the task, or letting them drink juice at their desk or something while they're doing the task. This is basically referred to sometimes as enriching the environment or having an enriched environment. It somehow can decrease the aversiveness of the task that they don't enjoy doing. The next one is called high P, low P, and I didn't want to have any technical jargon in this presentation today. I was trying to really keep it in plain English, but unfortunately I can't think of anything else to call this, so I'm going to use the term. But high P means high probability behavior, and low P means low probability behavior. And what this procedure is basically when you present the child with like 2 to 3 high probability demands, meaning there's a high probability the child will comply, and you follow that up with one demand that has a low probability of the child complying. So it would be, and it's presented in a very quick pace, so it would be something like, you know, stand up, touch your nose, clap your hands, do the math problem. And this doesn't work with all kids, but it is effective with some children according to the research, so it is something to consider. Another option would be to change your prompting. For example, some kids really don't like physical prompts, like if you try to assist them by guiding their hands through a process, they don't like that. Other children really do like that. Some children don't like error correction. If you try to tell them that they did something wrong and how to do it right, they get really bent out of shape. So with that kind of child, maybe you could use more of an errorless learning procedure where you teach them the correct answer from the get-go and then you fade out, so that they really never make mistakes, but they're getting the concept as you're beginning to fade that out. Also, some kids may do well with really using visual prompts, and so consider what the student likes in terms of prompting and maybe consider changing that. You could also give the child choices, so this might be them choosing the order of the task that they're going to do, which tasks they might be doing, and even maybe having a choice on what materials they're going to use for certain tasks. Another option for some kids that works, for those that are very inflexible and they feel like they need to know what's coming in the future and they want to prepare, is a structured schedule. Sometimes kids, if they just know what to expect, then they're okay. So that might be something that would work with some kids. And then, of course, as before, if the behavior is too dangerous to ignore, you might need to block it in some cases when it's occurring. Now, on the replacement behavior side, when a child is engaging in this challenge behavior to escape a situation or to avoid something they don't want to do, their replacement behavior could be to teach them to ask for help or to ask for a break or even to ask to change something about the task. And when the child does these behaviors, you would want to reinforce it every time it occurs. You might also like to make the replacement behavior easier to engage in than the challenging behavior is. So you can do this by actually making it difficult to engage in the challenging behavior. So for example, if you're going to sit down with a student and work on an assignment or something with them and you know that they're going to be likely to aggress towards you or something like that, you could put a table between you and the child during the task that makes it impossible for the child to reach over and to actually make contact with you. So that would be something to consider. On the consequence side, you would probably want to reinforce compliance. And if at all possible, don't allow the child to escape the situation. So keep presenting the demands, present them in the same way, same amount, and all of that kind of stuff. Do everything the same. In some cases, when we're talking about schools, you can't do that because a child can't be disruptive to the entire classroom. So when that happens, usually the child is sent out of the room, but they could be sent somewhere else with the task and then still required to do the task, but in a different environment within the school. If it's not possible, though, for whatever reason, to discontinue allowing the child to escape when they engage in the challenging behavior, then you would want to make the amount of escape they get for the replacement behavior greater than the amount of escape they get for the challenging behavior. So, for example, if they're going to engage in challenging behavior and they get to escape the task, try to only allow a minimal amount of escape, and then when they engage in replacement behavior, give them a lot of time to escape. And I know initially you're thinking, well, they're not going to get any work done, but I promise you that you can eventually slowly fade that. So even if the child's barely doing any work initially, over time you can start to reinforce compliance, teach the replacement behaviors, and set up different antecedent manipulations, and they will eventually be able to gradually work for longer periods. Especially if you're also reinforcing the absence of the behavior, the challenging behavior. This slide is going to provide you with tools for when kids engage in behaviors that are self-reinforcing. So on the antecedent end, you might want to ask yourself, are there acceptable settings in which it's okay for the child to engage in this particular challenging behavior? If there are, then set that up for the child and give them clear signals for when the behavior is okay and not okay. So it could even be like putting a green card up when it's okay and a red card up when it's not okay, and having that hanging in the classroom somewhere. And if there's certain settings where it's okay, saying, okay, you can do it, but only when you're, in a certain classroom or, during this particular time of day or something like that. You can also make it difficult to engage in the challenging behavior. So for example, if the child is a type of child that likes to spin wheels on objects, like on vehicles and things, you could keep those kinds of objects with spinning parts out of sight. So now it really doesn't become an issue because they can't even get access to anything with spinning wheels. Now on the replacement behavior side, you could teach the child to ask for items that provide the same stimulation that they're getting from the challenging behavior, and then of course give them those items when they ask. So for example, if you have a child who's balling up their fists or their hands into fists and they're doing it over and over and it looks really odd and it's an issue, you could give them a squeezy stress ball. It kind of serves the same stimulation, and they can do that instead, and that looks a little bit more appropriate. You could also give them a competing item, something else that can keep them busy so that they don't engage in the challenging behavior. Now, oftentimes when a behavior is self-reinforcing, they're doing it because they are bored and they don't have something else keeping them busy, or they have free time, because everyone has to have some free time, right? But maybe they don't even know how to use their free time. So the last item here is to teach them play or leisure skills. If they have things they can do, some skills, then when they're in those moments of kind of boredom, instead of body rocking or spinning objects or hand flapping, they can be doing these play or leisure skills instead. On the consequence side, you would want to give them a reinforcer if they don't engage in the self-reinforcing behavior for a period of time. Or you could also redirect them to an alternative behavior or an activity each time the behavior occurs. So, have something else ready to go that you can, every time they do it, you can say, here, come do this, and try to redirect their attention. You could also alter the environment so that sensory stimulation doesn't really occur anymore when they engage in the behavior. So to give you an example, if there was a child who likes to tap the table over and over again for auditory stimulation, you could pad the table so that it no longer makes a sound. Now, I want to get into talking about how do you know if the intervention is effective. Basically, it's important that you make data-based instead of emotion-based decisions, and to do this, you need to collect data on what you're doing and graph it. So you're going to be graphing frequency of challenging behavior, and you're going to be graphing percentage of correct replacement behavior. And your goal is that challenging behavior should be decreasing and replacement behavior should be increasing. So basically, your graph is going to want to look like this. And in this graph, I call this the magic X, because what you're seeing is in the beginning, tantrums, which are in light green, are really high, and the child making requests is really low. And then we implement a behavior intervention plan where we teach the child to make requests. And so the dark green requests increases while the tantrums decrease, and it forms a beautiful image here that looks like a magic X. And that's exactly what we're hoping to see. Now, much like the chicken or the egg analogy, you might be asking yourself, which came first, the challenging behavior or the skill deficits? We don't know necessarily if the child's engaging in challenging behavior because they're behind in their curriculum, or if the child's behind in their curriculum because they're engaging in the challenging behavior. Similarly, you might be asking yourself, should I deal with the student's tantrums or teach the student skills? When students have a problem and they can't communicate it, they are more likely to have challenging behaviors. So instead of looking at it as an either-or, think of them both being interrelated and work on at least on teaching the child to communicate while at the same time you are intervening on the challenging behavior. The idea here is to work on both in order to get the child caught up to prevent future challenging behavior while also treating challenging behavior now. And the truth is, and I'm bringing you back to this graph because they happen together. You teach the new skill of replacing the replacement behavior while at the same time working on the challenge behavior. You get your magic X, and you don't decide to only focus on one or the other. Along with dealing with challenging behavior, though, teachers of students with delays, autism, ADHD, or any other delays are sometimes faced with the challenge of filling in all of the gaps of everything that this student needs to learn. And it's kind of like trying to teach Swiss cheese, which is why I have this slide up here. The child has little holes here and there, and you have to fill in those gaps, and you have to figure out where those holes are, and that can be a huge challenge in and of itself, especially because kids will have splinter skills, be really advanced in one area and really behind in another. So I pose the question back to you again. Do you need to be Superman? And to answer that question, I have two more questions, which is, who are the BCBAs at your school, and what resources are available to you? These are the questions you should be asking. If you don't know the answers to these, you should be talking to other folks in your school district and asking these questions. I'm going to spend the rest of my time telling you about two resources that are available to you. This first one, CARD e-learning, was developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and it is an online training for dealing with challenging behavior and for teaching staff how to teach skills to children with autism. So this training actually provides information on that, and it's something you can do at your own pace online to learn how to teach skills and how to reduce challenging behavior to all the time for schools. So if it's something that your school is interested in, you can get access for sure. Now, even after people learn the how-to, so they learn all the procedures and techniques of ABA for teaching skills and for reducing challenging behavior, they're still going to have a lot of questions, and that's where we have a second resource, which is called Skills. And this resource provides you a curriculum for filling in the Swiss cheese holes. Okay, so all those gaps that you need to fill in, you can do that through the use of Skills. It provides you an assessment, and it gives you all your curriculum and lesson plans, and it helps you figure out where are the holes for each of those students. But it also, and this is the best part with respect to this presentation's topic, it provides a behavior intervention plan builder, which basically means it has a section for challenging behavior, and it walks you through the process of designing a behavior intervention plan for challenging behavior based on what we've talked about today, which is to have come up with a plan where you're going to change your antecedents, you're going to come up with replacement behaviors, and you're going to change your consequences. And it will actually design it for you simply by you answering a very, very short series of questions. Again, this is something you can have access to in a free trial. So I'd like to end the presentation today with a quote from Edna from The Incredibles. She says, remember, no capes. So remember, you don't need to be Superman and you don't need a cape, because what you actually need is tools that can be Superman for you. And if you're interested at all in a free trial of CARD e-learning or Skills, please do contact us. You can email us at customercare@skillsglobal.com. And I'd like to say thank you to all of you for attending my webinar today, and I look forward to a possible future with you in using both of these two softwares. Thank you very much.